One of the reasons there is concern about increasing casual sex in American society among young people is teen pregnancy. In the last decade, there's been an increase in moral panic around the issue of teen pregnancy. For example, the Hartford Courant ran an article titled Teen Pregnancy, a Major Problem in 2011. Last fall, the Niagara Gazette had an article titled Teen Pregnancy, a Major Issue in Niagara Falls. The governor of Mississippi made teen pregnancy a focal point of his State of the State address last year. There has been media backlash against coverage of the MTV show Teen Mom, which has been accused of glamorizing teen pregnancy. Recall the web link from Fox News on Teen Mom from your reading folder. Some groups fund public service announcements to raise awareness of this issue. Consider the web link from your reading folder from Ms. Magazine. However, over the past 50 years, other than a slight uptick in the late 1980s, teen pregnancy has been dropping in the U.S. So if teen pregnancy has been dropping and is at its lowest rate in 50 years, why is it understood to be a social problem? There are many different possible explanations for this. First, moral and religious opposition to premarital sex may provide a moral or value-based disapproval of teen pregnancy, since many teen pregnancies are not between married teens. Also, in modern America, we view teenagers as emotionally immature, lacking in communication skills, having unstable relationships, being dependent on their parents, and financially unstable. Many who might be comfortable with premarital sex might view teen sexuality as risky. They assume that teenagers experience sexual desire, but are not yet capable of making responsible decisions about sexual health and dealing with the consequences of sexuality. Social stigma, the social association of shame with an identity or characteristic, is often used to shame teenagers from being sexually active. Girls face especially harsh criticism for sexual interest and activity. Many young women describe feeling like they are stuck in a, quote, good girl, bad girl dichotomy, whereby being good stems from being chaste or avoiding sexuality. Girls are taught to avoid victimization and avoid being used in order to dissuade them from engaging sexually at what is considered a young age. This can be problematic because it encourages an antagonistic relationship between boys and girls and discourages girls from feeling ownership over their sexuality. The age at which women first give birth varies across countries and across time. In the U.S., it is currently about 25 years old on average, up from 21 in the 1970s. In Italy and Japan, the average age that mothers have their first child is over 30 years old. In many nations, it is as low as 18 years. In medieval Europe, some marriages occurred as young as 10 years old and sexual activity began with puberty. In Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet, it was noted that Juliet was 13 years old. The characters were sexually active, and this was not considered scandalous in the play. As recent as the 19th century in the U.S., age of sexual consent laws were 10 years old. This variation reminds us that views about what an appropriate time to become a parent is depend on the way that society is organized. Objectivists argue that if a certain social phenomenon makes the maintenance of society more difficult, then it is a social problem. So what about teen pregnancy? Is this an objective social problem? Many Americans argue that having a child as a teenager leads these women and their children into poverty. They argue that the causality is as follows: teen pregnancy leads to poverty. They argue that the causality is as follows: teen pregnancy leads to poverty. However, many researchers point out that there is a relationship between social class and access to birth control. Economists' research on teen pregnancy demonstrates that teenage child-rearing is more likely among young women who perceive their chances at long-term economic success as being low, even if they do, quote, play by the rules. This suggests that living in poverty makes someone more likely to become pregnant as a teenager, rather than arguing that becoming a teen parent causes someone to become poor. Here the causality is reversed. Poverty leads to teen pregnancy. This view of the way that living in poverty can increase one's risk of becoming pregnant as a teenager is supported by recent research on the importance of access to contraception in preventing teen pregnancy. In the U.S., access to birth control is likely the leading contributor to teen pregnancy. The state of Colorado was recently the site of an accidental experiment. An anonymous donor funded a $27 million program to distribute 18,500 intrauterine devices and 14,600 hormonal contraceptive implants, both are forms of birth control, to any low-income women that wanted them free of charge. The program has been hailed a huge success as teen pregnancy rates have dropped dramatically in the state relative to the national average. It was estimated that between 2010 and 2012, women on Medicaid avoided between 4,300 and 9,700 unwanted births, which saved the state as much as $111 million. Also, the abortion rate has dropped dramatically, by 42% among teenage girls or women, and 18% among women in their early 20s. Interestingly, the U.S. has been very resistant to embracing birth control for teens compared to other industrialized nations, even though we consider teen pregnancy a significant social problem. As you can see in the chart, the U.S. has low levels of birth control usage compared to a sample of other industrial nations.